before we actually start with this, we'll try to understand certain concepts. Number one, that what is the meaning of portfolio? Now let us say that you have some set of assets with you, you have some amount of cash, and you decided that entire amount of cash you are planning to invest into stock of, let's say, Reliance. So you had 10 lakh rupees in cash and you decided that you would invest entire 10 lakhs. Then we would say that your portfolio is made of Reliance stock and entirely of 10 lakh rupees. Instead of this, if you say that no, I just want to invest 9 lakh rupees in this and 9 lakh rupees in Reliance, remaining 1 lakh rupees you would keep in cash, you would say your portfolio is made of Reliance plus cash. If you have some real estate, we will add that here. If you have a house, if you have a car, all those assets that you have, all those assets combinedly would be called as portfolio. Now the question is that why the portfolio concept is so important. So why do we stress so much on this portfolio? So let's imagine that you have a portfolio which is made of A, B, C, D and E asset classes. You have different asset classes, different categories of securities into this particular portfolio. Now you come across an investment. And this investment, let's call it as Z. Now this investment is really good, and independently if you see this, you would say that it's really nice investment, I want to invest my money. But when you see investment from a context of a portfolio, you do not have to decide whether this investment Z is good. But what you need to decide is that when I would add this investment to my portfolio, how is it going to affect the performance of my portfolio? And that's why the subject becomes really important, because by this time you have already studied the meaning of equity. So you know well that what is equity, you already know derivatives, you already know fixed income, or I'm assuming that you know them. And then finally you would get to know alternative investments. You would know all these four categories of investments. That means that by the time you pass level 1, you would be an expert in asset valuation. But then knowing only equity is not sufficient, because you would need to know that when a client comes and says that I have a portfolio of let's say $100 million, how much out of this amount you are planning to invest into equity, how much of this amount should be in derivatives, how much of this amount should be in fixed income, and how much of this amount should be in alternative investments. And this is where portfolio management is going to help you. Now, third point is called as concept of diversification. Now, it's a very common practice. How many of you are working here? Very few of you. Okay. See, generally the tendency is that once you start working in corporates, and let's say that you're working with a company called L&T, and let's say you're at a very senior managerial level. Now, you have this excess cash of let's say 1.5 CR, and you decide that I want to invest this cash into equity markets. Now you go to some guru, and he says that you want to, ideally you should invest in those stocks where you are extremely comfortable with the business process. Right? You understand business in and out, and you're really comfortable with the way things function. So what you decide to do is, you say that I'm going to invest the entire money into my own company, that is, I'm going to invest the entire money into L&T itself. So now this 1.5 CR cash that you have, now that you invested this money into L&T. Now see, what happens is that, let us assume that the company is doing really good, which means that your salaries are increased substantially. Now because company is also doing good, the value of your portfolio is going to increase. But now, in case if the company stops performing good, and if there is something wrong with the company, there are two consequences. Number one, you lose your job. Simultaneously, this is the time when you need your investments the more. That is the time value of your investment will also reduce substantially. Now, and this is why the context of portfolio becomes really important. Because what we would say is that your job, that means your salaries, and the value of your investments are positively related to each other. And in statistics we use a concept, and we'll call that concept as correlation. And we would say that correlation is a positive number, and therefore when the correlation is very positive, when one is increasing, other one is also increasing, it is not giving you required diversification benefit. And what would be meaning of diversification? That if I decide that I work in infra industry, let me figure out if there is any kind of stock which has got some sort of a negative correlation with this particular industry. So every time there is something going wrong with my job, at least value of my investments will increase and it will give me some protection. The same logic is applicable for investments. So when a client comes to you and he says that I want to invest 100 million, the first question that you'll ask him is, what is the level of risk averseness? And this averseness means that how much the client is willing to take risk or how much he is not willing to take risk. So if I tell you that someone is risk averse, it means that someone who is not at all. Meaning of risk averse is avoiding risk, that somehow you want to eliminate risk, you are not willing to take risk. So every time we want to take some decision, we will do it in the context of a portfolio. We would try to judge what is the risk awareness of that particular client, and based on that we would do some decision making for it. Now once you decide the risk awareness, then you would probably say that okay, client is some rating. Let's say that client is into category of B. Now everyone will have their own proprietary ratings. Now this category B means that client is moderate. He does have some risk appetite, but also he wants to play safe simultaneously. So you decided that you want to allocate his money as 40% equity, 30% debt. You said that to manage liquidity, remaining 30%, you're going to keep in cash. Now once you've chosen that this 40% is to be invested into equity, then you will have multiple choices, whether I invest into small caps, whether I should invest into mid caps, or whether I should go only for blue chips. Now within that, which sector do I want to be sector specific? Do I also only want to be in IT industry, or do I want to be in any other industry? So these kind of questions are answered by the theory of portfolio management. That how much in debt, how much in equity, within equity what category, within categories what amount into what category. All those questions would be answered, and one answer for all this question is called as optimization. That for a given level of risk, you try to optimize the rate of return that is to be received by this particular investment. Now we'll start with the level 1 curriculum. And the entire curriculum or entire textbook that you would find on portfolio management, that would be based on work of one single person. The name of this person is have you heard of him? Yes, no, maybe. So you must be knowing that the way economics is probably 5,000 year old, or some other science might be 7,000, 8,000, 3,000 year old, finance is only 100, 150 year old. It's a relatively new subject, which means that all those big theories which are there, which have been developed by various people, those people are still living. Same is the case with this person, that as of now, he still exists. He is about 85, 87 years old, and he is still a professor with Chicago University. So what did this guy do? He first studied philosophy, and then he got really bored, so he thought that okay, I want to study some statistics. So he studied some statistics, and then he decided that let me use my philosophy knowledge and statistics and a little bit of economics, and let me put that into theory of portfolio management. And then he created this theory, and the theory was so popular that in 1997 this guy actually got a Nobel Award in economics for his work. Now it's a very controversial theory because he would try to explain the whole concept using graphs, curves, linear relationship, regression equations, and we'll do that slowly. And The entire theory is based on certain premises and certain assumptions, and one of those assumptions which people find very funny is the assumption of rationality. He says that investors are rational, and the entire calculations, entire assumption, entire theory is based on this one basic fundamental principle or assumption. And somehow then people have realized that this assumption is never true in the market. And in fact, there was one particular person who lost good amount of portfolio, good amount of value of his portfolio. He was trying to manage his portfolio based on the principles given by this particular person. So he got so mad at him that he decided to sue him. So of course, the sue was not valid. I mean, the case was not validated, but there was a big laugh that used to happen in US newspapers, because it was very rare that someone who's managing a portfolio would sue someone who's developed a theory on a particular subject. Now let's try to understand that what this particular person is trying to say to us. Now throughout this entire week we are going to do a lot of mathematics, because portfolio management is about optimization and mathematics. So we'll try to do it in a step-by-step fashion. Now what he's going to say is that there are so many assets and there are different categories of returns that one person can receive from these assets. He says that what are those criteria based on which selection should be done? Should I select an asset based on what is the growth in sales? Or should I select the asset based on how much return this particular stock has given in the past? He says that there are only three parameters which are important to select a particular stock. Number one, that what is the expected rate of return from this particular stock or this particular asset that we are talking about. So now this expected rate of return might be futuristic. For example, I take L&T and I say that in the last 5 years L&T has given you a rate of return of, let us say, 7% per annum. That's historical. Probably I might think that this year L&T is going to give 11%, 10%, whatever it is, but one expected rate of return, benefit, that's the first criteria that we need to see. Second one, that fair enough, you're giving us a return of 7%, but how consistently this asset has been giving a return of 7%? So that consistency is to be measured by that if something is consistent, that means it is not volatile. That means it is not deviating. So we try to measure the volatility by standard deviation. So I would avoid using the word standard deviation. I would simply say volatility of returns, or simply volatility. And third, where he places a lot of importance, he says that fair enough, you see volatility, you would also see expected rate of return. But the most important thing that you see is, you see those investments from the context of portfolio, that I already have a set of assets with me, I'm going to add one more asset to it. So the moment I add one more asset to my portfolio, what kind of changes it is going to bring to the existing portfolio. And generally we would try to see by calculating certain numbers like covariance or correlation, but at this stage I would simply say relationship between various assets in the portfolio. Relationship between various assets in the portfolio. So what do I mean by this? That let's say I decide that I want to diversify. I have, let's say, 100 lakhs with me, 1 CR. I decided out of this 70 lakhs I am going to invest into some real estate, some flat, some land, some place. And simultaneously, if I invest my remaining 30 lakhs into a company like DLF, then probably both the assets will have a positive correlation. That is, if the real estate would increase, DLF would also increase. When real estate would decrease, DLF would also decrease. So then probably I am not giving myself the benefit of diversification. So only considering real estate as a good asset is not important. I also need to consider that when I add it to my existing portfolio, what impact it is going to have on the entire portfolio of my company or entire portfolio of my investments. Once this is done, now you write down this concept. First concept is called as standard deviation. Now first we'll understand the logic behind this and then we'll go into mathematical computations. I take two stocks. This is my stock A. This is my stock B. I am trying to find out what is the rate of return that these stocks have given, let's say in last 6 months. So I'm finding out monthly rate of return. So I'm writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First month, let's say stock A gives you 10%. Second, stock immediately gives you 40%. Then it gives you minus 30%. Then it gives you positive 20%. Then it gives you positive 50. It gives you negative 30. The other stock, it gives you 10% all the time. It does not deviate whatsoever. Let's assume this to be some sort of a fixed income instrument. So let's forget, let's not call it a stock. Let's say a FD in some bank. So 10%, 4, 5 and 6. 10%, 10%, 10%. So what I do is, first thing that I'll do is, I'll first figure out that on an average, which investment has been giving me more returns. That means I would simply calculate a mathematical average for both the stocks. So total of all of these divided by 6, the mathematical average of A investment is going to be 10%. And the mathematical average of this one is obviously again 10%. Just check if the calculations are correct. I hope you don't need calculators for this. Is it 10? That's impressive. Now, I know that on an average the rate of return which has been given by both the investments are exactly same. But then, given an opportunity out of these two, which one would you prefer to invest in? B. Definitely B, because you would say that there is so much of volatility, and now we are going to call, in the context of portfolio, we are going to say volatility is risk. So there is so much of risk in stock A, whereas the rate of return which is giving me is exactly 10%. There is absolutely no volatility, which means no risk. Then it makes sense for me to invest into the asset B. Now in case if you decide that we want to calculate standard deviation for this, the formula for standard deviation is going to be, do we have anyone scared of mathematics here? Is there anyone who's scared of mathematics? Good. So the formula of standard deviation, there is no mathematics in standard deviation, don't worry. Summation of x minus x bar square divided by n or n minus 1, depending on we are calculating this for a population or sample. So if I simply keep it as n, that means this is standard deviation of my population. If I make my formula as summation of x minus x bar square divided by n minus 1, then I would say that this is the standard deviation formula for a sample. Sample means a small part of your entire population. The first one, this is standard deviation for population. Meaning of population is that if I want to calculate on an average how many hours a CFA candidate studies, a level 1 candidate all over the world, then all those people who have registered for CFA level 1 are going to be the population. But if I try to derive the same conclusion by trying to figure out how many on an average hours you people study, then you are a small subset of the entire population, so you people would be called as sample. So if I calculate standard deviation for a sample, summation of x minus x bar square divided by n minus 1, it is population divided by n. Do you want to ask any questions? I'm expecting one.
Is it a square? Square is square.
Yes, it is a square. This is actually variance. It is a square. But I'm expecting some question.
Why do we square it?
Huh? Why?
Why do we square it?
Why do we square it? Why do we take the square root? Okay. Because we square it here.
Yes, sir. What is that process for?
Yeah. If you can go further and think, yes, I want to question the same direction.
No. Because the negative and basically that get
The reason why do we square it? Yeah, because we want absolute number here. And probably it's also something else. Actually, the answer goes into calculus. Why it is like this? But yes, this is how it is. But there is something else that I would like to ask you people to ask. Huh?
What is next?
Of course. Inspiring value. These are x, 30%, 20%, any random variable. That is x, x minus x bar. Don't ask me which subject. Okay, forget it.
So why does the sample consider n minus 1?
Yeah, good. Other way around. Yes. That's the question that I was asking. That why is it n here and why is it n minus 1? I mean, why do you accept things as it is? Why don't you ask yourself then why the formulas are different for these two? Yes, Kabir. We have people who study statistics.
Sampling there is always chance for error. And I mean, when I said historically, when they saw n minus 1 gave a better approximation.
Yes. Okay. See, there are 2-3 reasons for this. The first reason, which I find very intuitive, is that there might be probably 1000 observations out of which I have randomly chosen 6. Now, there is a very, very good possibility that out of the 6 variables that I have chosen, one of those variables was my mean itself. There was a good possibility that out of whatever random variables that I have chosen, one of those was my mean. So what would happen is that in my formula, x minus x bar would become 0. And to adjust for that, again I would say, let's adjust my denominator and say n minus 1. This is 1. Second, that I take a small sample and based on my sample, I will try to predict the standard deviation of the entire population. And I want to be more conservative in my approach. And I want to divide this by a smaller number so that standard deviation comes out to be a bigger number. So what he said is correct, that the statistical reason given for this is, they say that degrees of freedom for sample are n minus 1 and degrees of freedom is how much room you have to move around, how much comfort you have to move around. They say that for population it's n, but the moment you take sample, you shrink your degrees of freedom and your degrees of freedom would become n minus 1. Now, the interpretation of this number is really important. So what we'll do is that for calculation, understanding the calculation, we'll try to calculate the standard deviation for this, the standard deviation for this. We'll spend some time on analysis of this, and then we'll move on to the next point. So let's start calculations for this particular variable. 2x minus x bar, then square it, then take summation and divide by n, then take under root. Yes, you're supposed to do it.
The sample, right?
Sample, yes.
So that means, no division. You want any divisions?
No. Where are you saying here?
Second B, which is fixed percent. I mean,
B, yeah. Standard deviation would be 0 for it.
so yeah, basically make it.
How much? Twenty-one. 31 points. If this is population, I took n. If I take this as 5, this would be for population. Let's do it to sample as well. 34.05. Let's do it for my sample. Is it done? Okay. Ashish. If it is not done, then leave it. Now understand this part. This is very important, and probably you are going to really like this. That now during my times when I wrote my level 1, there used to be 4 questions, like 4 options. Now you have 3 A, B, C. So we used to have A, B, C and D. That time it used to be more of a mathematical course. There used to be a lot of mathematics, and this was one of the favorite questions. They used to give 10 odd variables and used to ask calculate standard deviation. Now that used to kill a lot of time because you have to make a big table and do it everything. Now fortunately there is a direct key on your calculator which would calculate this. Unfortunately I learned it after my 11th, so I could never really put it to use. But yes, now you can do it. Second 7. Can you see DA, TA written there or DA, TA written? So that's data. Now it would ask you x1. So there is going to be x and there is going to be y. In this case we don't have any y with us, so we don't have to fill in anything. x1 is going to be 10. So simply say 10, enter. Press downward arrow, it will ask you y1, ignore that. Downward arrow one more time, x2, 40. x2 should be 40. x3 should be negative 30. And keep on filling in the numbers up to x6. Is it done? Have you punched in all the numbers? Akka again, Naveen? Did you know this? You know the function? Now you press second 8. Second 8 is start. So now, probably the first thing would be LIN. Ignore that, not required. आगे आओ. क्या पूछ रहे हैं अभी? n is equal to 6 दिखा रहा है, so number of variables is 6 नीचे आओ, क्या है अभी x bar mean 10 है, yes, come downwards, x bar is mean method, नीचे sx. Now a lot of people keep on forgetting this, so probably you write down that on this calculator when they say sx it means standard deviation of sample. Sx is sample standard deviation. Downward arrow one more time, probably you would see a sign like this. We call it as sigma. That would be sigma x, that is standard deviation of population. Is it the same number that we have calculated? Where is the number? Here. Yes. Is it same 31.09 and 34.05? So this is how the standard deviation can be calculated directly, but that does not in any way mean that you don't need to remember the formula. You still need to know the formula, but at least on exam when a question like this comes, you can save substantial amount of time using this. Is it clear? Now calculate these two standard deviations, then I will take you to the next method. Now by the way, I am assuming that you must be knowing that standard deviation square is called as variance. So we used to do this in probably 5th, 6th standard. Now let's say stock A and let's say stock B is 10, 20, minus 40, 10, 40, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 19, minus 7, minus 41, minus 42, 90. Yes, calculate standard deviations and mean of both the variables A and B together. Sorry? Yes, absolutely. That's what you're supposed to do. When you're supposed to store A and B together. X would be the first variable, B would be the second. This is yes. Yes, mean of A 11.66. Oh, fair enough. SX is 27.868 and sigma x is 25.44. यहाँ पे mean of B 7.82. Standard deviation 79 and population is 38.19. Now there might be a lot of cases that you might be coming across A, B, R. Don't worry about them at this stage. A and B you would have to deal with them in level 2. So the first one LIN, A and B, that's going to be in level 2. So don't worry about that.
Can you repeat the values?
Which value?
The B, the mean of
Your
B
mean.
has to be on.
It's 7.82.
Yeah, that is basically mean.
Mean of this set has to be.
SB is standard. SB is what?
SP is sample. This is sample standard deviation. This is population standard deviation. These are the signs used in the calculator. Yeah, what was the sign? Yeah. You have to second K work. Second K work has to work. It has to work. Second K work. It's not.
Yes, you're doing second year degree.
Second K work has to work. There is no other way of doing it. Are you in that function and doing second K work? Or are you doing outside it? Enter the function, then say second K work. Are you in start? Second 7. Second K work. Sorry. Second data. Second K work. You will have to clear the data first. Alright then, so I'm assuming that you're reasonably okay with standard deviation. Interpolation is more important. What it means is that on an average the variability is 52.79%. It can move either ways. It can give you a positive and variability from mean. And on average it gives you a return of 7.82, but then variability is 52%, which is really huge. Whereas variability here is 27.8%. And then later on these same numbers we are going to use when we study your quantitative techniques, and then assuming you based on what is the characteristic of your data set. Is it following some peculiar type of distribution? And I think in level 1 you mostly have those normal distributions. We will try to derive certain conclusions that what percentage of your data is within what category. That is, can you say that probably 68% of the time my average return is going to be between this and this number. Right? So all these conclusions can be drawn based on this standard deviation number. Are we clear with this? Now next one. This number is called as covariance, which is to be calculated as summation of x minus x bar, y minus y bar divided by n. Summation of x minus x bar, y minus y bar divided by n. Now what does this number mean? Meaning of this number is that if we have two data sets again, stock A and stock B, when stock A gave a return of 10%, stock B probably gave you a return of 12%. Stock A increased by 6%, stock B increased by 8%. When this decreased by 10%, this decreased by 14%. This decreased by 30%, this decreased by 35%. Which means what we see is that when one is increasing, the other one is increasing. When one is decreasing, the other one is decreasing. So we try to see that what is the strength of the relationship. Is the strength positive, that is when one increases, other one also increases, or is the strength negative, that one decreases, other one also decreases. We calculate a number and we try to measure the strength based on this particular number called covariance. of stock. This increases over. Stock A, stock B. This is one set. The other one that we are considering is stock C and stock D. Now, just a minute. Now we'll create some sort of a random prices for these stocks. So let's say, will I spell it correctly? Between some random prices between, let's say 100 and 200. And same for stock B, probably we would say and between 300 and 500. Alright. So now we have these two sets of prices: 127, 492, 199, 393, and so on and so forth. The prices are moving into certain ranges. What we can clearly observe here is that whatever the relationship that exists between stock A and B, probably the same relationship exists between stock C and D. You are just multiplying them with 100. So absolute values are different, but the relationship that exists between A and B and C and D are exactly same, isn't it? That from 127 it increased to 199.00. This also 492 to 393.00. So the relationship is exactly same, only the numbers are different. Now I would calculate covariance for these two data sets. I'll also calculate standard deviation for A, standard deviation for B. Now I'm going to use a direct formula so that we can save time here. At this stage we are more interested in interpretation of this number. Covariance has come out to be negative, and meaning of a negative covariance is that when one increases, the other one decreases. When one increases, the other one is decreasing. That's why we have a negative covariance. But now, isn't covariance a measure of relationship between these two? It is, right? The ultimate purpose of covariance is what? That we want to see that how strongly stock A and B is linked, or how strongly stock C and D is linked. So ideally, though the absolute values of these are different, their covariance as a number should have come out to be same, because relationship is same. But you can clearly see that covariance is not same. Why? Because if you go back to the formula x minus x bar, y minus y bar, that if the absolute value of your variables is very, very high, automatically covariance as a number would come out to be very high, right? So then can I conclude from this that since this covariance, let's forget that these are negative numbers, let's assume that these are positive. So can I conclude that this covariance is a larger number, therefore the strength of relationship between C and D is more strong than A and B? No, it's exactly same. That means the number of covariance, whether it's large or small, is not telling us that which one is stronger than which one. What covariance as a number will only tell us is that if the number is positive, relationship is positive. But we cannot say that a covariance of 10 and covariance of 20, if you have these two sets, covariance of 20 is stronger relationship than covariance of 10. We can't conclude that. The only thing that can be concluded is a positive covariance means positive relationship. When one increases, other one increases. Negative covariance means negative relationship. When one increases, other one decreases. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the standard deviation for stock A and stock B. Again, I would use a direct formula. This is standard deviation of A. The same two numbers will calculate for C and D as well. Okay. Again, can you see that standard deviation A is 24, whereas standard deviation C is coming out to be 2425. Again, standard deviation is a higher absolute number. What I do is I use this relationship for my benefit. That when the absolute data sets are very high, covariance is a very high number, standard deviation is also a very high number. So I try to standardize these two. If I wanted to compare A and B versus relationship between C and D, then I would try to standardize this. And how would I do that? I'll calculate a number, I'll call that as correlation. And how will I calculate that number? I would simply say a higher covariance divided by both the standard deviations together. And now the correlation would come out to be exactly same. And since correlation is standardized, it is not affected by the absolute values of individual variables. We can conclude that correlation of probably 0.5 between correlation of 0.5 and 0.7. 0.7 is a stronger relationship than 0.5. Is this clear? So how did I calculate correlation? I use this formula. I said, just a minute, let me finish this. Correlation is equal to covariance divided by standard deviation of first stop into standard deviation of second stop. Covariance divided by both the standard deviations will give you correlation coefficient. Is it clear? Okay. It's still not 100% clear. It takes a lot of time to be really clear with these things, but probably with few examples it will become more clear. Yes.